Picture a five and dime on a Saturday morning in 1955. Not a gun store. A five and dime, the kind with a lunch counter and a candy case and a girl at the register. You walk in past the school supplies and the sewing notions, and there, right at the end of the aisle, is a wooden barrel, the kind they use to sell pickles out of. And standing in it, jumbled together like umbrellas in a stand, are rifles. Not new rifles, war rifles. Lee Enfields that came out of a British armory. Mausers with German proof marks still on the receiver. Rifles that had been carried across Europe by men who did not come home. Standing in a barrel, in a dime store, in the middle of America, with a hand-lettered card leaning against the rim. $12.95. Take your pick. Nobody asked your name. Nobody made a phone call. There was no form, no waiting, no background check. You reached into the barrel the way you'd reach into a bin of hammers, picked the one with the best wood, and carried it to the register. This isn't a story about cheap guns. It's a story about how the leftovers of two world wars ended up in a dime store barrel, and about the exact autumn that shut the barrel for good. Start with the $20 bill in your hand, because the money is the whole story. $20 in 1955 comes to about $230 today, if you measure it by prices. But that's the wrong way to feel it. Measure it against a paycheck instead. A factory man that year brought home somewhere around $75 or $80 in a week. So that 20 in your hand was about a day and a half of work. A day and a half. And for a day and a half of your working life, you could carry home a rifle that had been to Normandy, or to Burma, or to the Eastern Front, and still have change for a box of shells and a cup of coffee at the counter on the way out. So where did they all come from? Two world wars had happened, and when a war ends, the guns don't. Every army in Europe came out of 1945 sitting on mountains of rifles it no longer needed. And then, through the 50s, those same armies started rearming to a new NATO standard, which meant the old bolt actions weren't just surplus anymore. They were in the way. And one man understood exactly what that meant. His name was Samuel Cummings. He was born in Philadelphia in 1927, and he was recruited by the Central Intelligence Agency in 1950 while he was going through George Washington University on the GI Bill, recruited specifically as a weapons expert, a man who could look at a crate of foreign rifles and tell you what they were and what they were worth. In 1953, at 26 years old, with essentially nothing to his name, he founded a company in Alexandria, Virginia, that would come to be called Interarms. And Cummings did something nobody else was doing at that scale. He went to the governments themselves. When the British Army switched over to a new rifle in the late 50s, Cummings bought their old Lee Enfields, the rifle of two world wars, for 88 cents apiece. 88 cents. Those same rifles came into the American market at $10 to $15 each, and every one of them was profit stacked on profit. He ran his warehouses out of Alexandria for a very specific reason. It was the only non-union port on the East Coast, and he shipped his rifles across the Atlantic on the same Finnish freight line that carried newsprint to the Washington Post. So the newspaper was, in a manner of speaking, helping to pay the freight on half the world's small arms. So what did your $20 actually buy? Cummings ran a mail-order catalog called Hunter's Lodge, and the prices in it are hard to believe now. Rifles for as little as $9.95. And here is how they were advertised. Not as heirlooms, not as collectibles, but as throwaway guns. The pitch was that a hunter could take one into the woods, shoot his deer, and if the rifle got dropped in a creek or left leaning against a tree, so what? It cost $10. Leave it. Let that sit for a second. The rifles that men now keep in safes, that men now pass to their sons, were sold to their grandfathers as disposable. So your 20 could buy a Lee Enfield at $12.95 with change left over for a box of 303. Or it could buy 2 rifles at $9.95 if you didn't mind rough wood. Whole columns of newspaper advertising, rifle after rifle, and not one price above $20. I'll get to the autumn that ended all of it, and to why it wasn't only politicians who wanted it ended. But if you or your father ever pulled a rifle out of a barrel like that, do me a favor and hit subscribe, because these are the stories nobody is telling anymore. Now, a piece of this that men get wrong, and it's worth being straight about. The foreign rifles, the Enfields, the Mausers, the Carcanos, the Arisakas, those were the barrel guns. Those came in by the shipload, and those were the ones piled in bins at the dime store and the hardware store and the war surplus shop downtown. The American rifles were a different road. If you wanted a 1903 Springfield or an M1 Garand, you generally went through the government's own program, the Director of Civilian Marksmanship, and you had to be an NRA member in good standing to do it. The M1 Garand was first offered to civilians in the fall of 1955, announced in the pages of American Rifleman. A used but serviceable Springfield ran about $30 through that program, $50 for a new one, plus $1.85 for packing. So both things are true. The barrel was real, but the rifle in the barrel was far more likely to have a British or a German proof mark on it than an American one. Now, why was any of it so cheap? It wasn't magic. It was the biggest fire sale in the history of manufactured goods. 2 world wars of production, dumped on a market by governments that wanted the warehouse space back. And there was almost nothing standing in the way of it. No import restriction worth the name. No paperwork. No record. A crate of rifles cleared customs about the same as a crate of bicycles. That openness is what put the barrel in the dime store. It's also, it turned out, the thing that could not last. Here is where the story turns. And it does not turn only on the reason you're expecting. By the mid-60s, the cheap imports were doing something the newspapers weren't writing about. They were eating the American gun industry alive. Winchester, Remington, Savage, every one of them was trying to sell a new rifle at $80 or $90 against a barrel of war rifles at $12. And they had been asking Washington for relief for years. Then came the assassinations. President Kennedy in 1963, killed with a cheap Italian surplus rifle bought by mail. Martin Luther King in April of 1968. Robert Kennedy in June. And Washington finally moved. On October 22, 1968, President Johnson signed the Gun Control Act, and buried inside it was a clause that had nothing to do with assassinations at all. From that day forward, a firearm could only be imported into the United States if it was found to be suitable for sporting purposes. Military surplus rifles were not. In one line of law, the entire trade was finished, and the American manufacturers who had been asking for exactly that got exactly that. Sam Cummings saw it coming. He filled his Alexandria warehouses to the roof before the law took effect, enough to feed the market for years. But the river had been dammed. His commercial peak in America ended in 1968, and he spent the rest of his career selling to the rest of the world instead. And notice what didn't happen. The dime store didn't close. The barrel was still standing at the end of the aisle. It just never got refilled. So walk back up to that barrel today with the same $20 bill in your hand. That Lee Enfield at $12.95 now runs $600 to $900, and the good ones go higher. A decent M1 Garand is $1,500 and climbing, and there are no more coming. The supply is a fixed number, and every year some of them wear out or get sporterized or disappear. The rifles that were advertised as disposable are now the ones men refuse to sell. But go to a gun show, or sit at the right kitchen table, and you'll still find a gray-haired man with an Enfield he pulled out of a barrel when he was 19 years old. Rough wood, mismatched numbers, worth 50 times what he paid. And he will tell you exactly which store it was, and exactly what the card on the barrel said. If that was you, or your father, Tell me in the comments what you pulled out of that barrel and what you paid for it. Subscribe, and I'll keep telling these.